Hello, we are here to talk about Airtable's brand new interfaces feature. I'm super excited about this. I'm sure you are too. If you are like me, you are an Airtable user for so many parts of your life and work, and this interface feature is amazing. So in this video, I'm gonna briefly talk about what interfaces, what is it, what is interfaces. We'll have a little demo. I'm going to build a little sample interface, and we're going to talk about what interfaces doesn't do right now. So it does a lot of things. There are a few things it doesn't do, but overall, it is an amazing feature. I've been able to dive in and play with it a little bit, so I hope this video is useful to you. So let's jump in. So in the beginning, if you're anything like me, when you first saw Airtable, you saw what looked to be Excel. Maybe an Excel killer, depending on how you feel about it. But it was very grid-like, Excel-like, Excel-y, if that's a word. But there were some differences because it's a database, so there was linking fields and columns and things like that. So Airtable advanced it. They created different view types. You could have grid view to look at your data. You could have a form view. You could have a calendar view. You could create a gallery of your data. You could have a Kanban view, timeline, Gantt chart. Amazing. So as you begin to use Airtable, there are some challenges. When you use Airtable, and you have other people using your Airtable, everybody gets access to all of the tables and columns in your base. As of right now, there isn't any permissions. I can't give someone access to 3 out of the 6 columns in this Airtable. I have to give them access to everything. It's kind of an all or nothing proposition. You could hide some things with views and columns hidden, and you could do some trickery, but all in all, everyone has access to your database, and they can duplicate it, copy it, do whatever they need to do. That's one problem. Another problem is that when people are using the base itself, depending on what you need to do, data input can be a chore. So if you have a grid view or any view, and you've got like 20 or 30 columns, you have data you need to see to make decisions on other columns, it gets a little bit cumbersome swapping between views and scrolling left to right to find the right columns, and it's just a very spreadsheet-like thing, right? So what was holding Airtable back from, say, being an Asana or, almost any SaaS product, there's so many of them that you could emulate in Airtable, but if you can't get over the way you're consuming and utilizing the data, you would maybe fall back to one of those tools, right? So Asana, I think I did an exercise, and Asana is probably more advanced now, but previously you could build Asana pretty much in Airtable with the help of a tool like Integromat or something like that, if you could digest the view and the grid and table structure. Otherwise, Airtable is just a big box of Legos. That's what I like to call it. It's a lot of Legos you can build stuff with. So that's what you used to have in the past. So what happened after people went from a view like this, where they get to experience Airtable and there's view permissions, you had companies that would build interfaces on top of Airtable to solve some of that problem. So tools like Stacker would use Airtable as its primary database, and you could build more CRM-based, dashboardy-based interfaces on top of that Airtable data, and you could invite people via permissions to access that data. Pretty nifty tool. There are some pros and cons to tools like this. They don't sync right away. It's not real-time data. It's not native. Depending on what you do, it can be like a very expensive cost. But, these companies grew doing that. Now, Airtable introduces interfaces, which is taking the place of what a lot of these utilities used to do. So now I can create my own consumable interface view where I can read and edit and manipulate data native in Airtable real time, and I can invite people just to see and access my interfaces without them accessing the underlying Airtable database. Amazing. So that is what Airtable Interfaces is. It's almost like a combination of grid view. I think there's some Kanban. There might be some Kanban and some chart views, but it's like a combination of all that stuff just on one page or one view. So we'll jump in and we'll kind of explore it a little bit. So when I was playing around with it, what I wanted to do was kind of understand like a common use case. So I'm just gonna add a base here. I'm gonna start with a template. And I'm going to use content calendar just as an example. So we're just going to create a brand new content calendar. I'm going to use this template. And this will be the template for my underlying interfaces. So your interface is attached to a base. All right, so I've got my content pipeline. The workflow is pretty simple. You have a concept of a content pipeline. This is kind of where people are posting content, and you can kind of say the channels the content's going to go on, the due date, some of the data, and people kind of manage like a social media calendar, if you will. There's also campaigns. And then they have the concept of results. So let's just say that as part of the content pipeline, you want to create a view for your manager to review content and approve it for final, thumbs up or whatever. We might create, in the old days, we might create a checkbox, and we might say, approve, and here's your checkbox, and then the manager would log into Airtable and just look through these records and basically approve them, right? They might have a view, be a little bit more fancy than this. They might have a view for content that needs approval. They'd kind of approve the content that way. So with interfaces, we can build an interface for them to do their approval process. So I'm just going to click on interfaces here. I'm going to click on start building. I'm going to call this content approval. Actually, I'm going to call it content management. I'll show you why in a second. Basically, in interfaces, I have an interface called content management, and I can basically have different pages or views to this interface project. So right now I'm gonna, and there's different layouts. I will tell you briefly about them. You've got a record review layout, which basically has this little left sidebar, this little left nav where your records appear, and as you click through the records, the things on the right side dynamically change based on the record that you selected. So that's kind of like the record review. You have a dashboard, which is kind of like a bunch of components and widgets you're dragging on the page, and then every component or widget, you're defining the table and view that it's assigned to. You've got record summary, where you select a table with records, and as you select the record, it allows you to have like a little bit of a summary information to kind of cycle through. And then you have blank canvas. Blank canvas, you can create all of these except for record review. I couldn't find a way to create that record review left side nav workflow, but I could create everything else. So we're going to start with record review. So I'm going to click on next. you choose a table that is gonna host your data that's gonna permanently sit on the left-hand side. So we're gonna choose content pipeline. You can copy the data options from a view, like it'll copy like your filters and stuff. I'm not going to do that right now. I'm just going to say next. Pick elements allows us to pick elements. This part is a little bit of a bummer because I can't search. So if you have like a table with like a bunch of columns, it's not really easy to like search and click through all these. So I'm just going to click next. And here's my page. I'm going to call this approval pipeline, and I'm going to click finish. All right, so here is my basic interface. Right away, if I just click preview, this is showing me exactly what this interface would look like. So if someone clicked and I shared it with the manager, they would just cycle through and kind of see this content. But what I'm going to do, we're going to make that approval pipeline. So first thing I'm going to do is on this left hand, this little pop out, you can add elements. So I can add elements to the right hand side in like this grid. If you add the all elements, it's kind of like you can pretty much add anything. You could add random text. You could add a divider. As you click and hold, it kind of asks you where you want to move data. Once you move it as well, you can kind of like resize it a little bit, and you get access to some text effects and whatnot. I'm going to delete this. You can also add grids, which is a really interesting feature. So let's say part of my content pipeline approval workflow, I just want to have a random grid at the bottom of data attached to, and well, once you select the grid, you can have this properties box for the data. I could say I wanted to be related to results for whatever reason, and it's going to just show me a results table just here. It's not doing anything, but it's just a results table that I can have. So as I cycle through, maybe I want to like look at results. Maybe I want to click in a record, have that pop out. So you could have a results table or whatever table you want. For our workflow, we want a checkbox for the approval pipeline. So we could add, we're going to go to record list. When you click on this here, this basically means whatever record you select here, this is a dynamic element that will change on the screen, this second option. So if I say approve, I'm just going to grab approve, and I'm going to grab creator, right? So notice now that I did that, as I cycle through, the creators change based on what I selected. Now, I can also edit these fields. So if I click on this, I can say this is editable. I could say this is editable, and I could say all these are editable. So you can kind of create this experience where you can in real time click and edit these fields, or maybe you can only edit some fields. These are pretty flexible too, so you could have due date here, and maybe I don't know if there's another date in here. Oh, whatever, I'll grab status. You could have status here. You could kind of swap, move between these two. Anything that has like these little dotted dashes as grid components, you can like color a different color. So I could like, bring some stuff out as important or whatnot. You can click and there's some other options, like if you want to label or not, what size you want it to be. All of these have those basic features of editable and what size you want it to be. Now, the one thing that is a little bit missing is your buttons. So I really fell in love with the button feature in Airtable and being able to like trigger events and stuff. You can add buttons to the views, but their only clickable buttons are ones that aren't based on scripts. So if I go back to base, and if I have two buttons, script button, I'm going to make this a button, and I'm just going to say this is going to run a script, of which I don't even have one. Right? So there's my Hello World 1 script button where I can click it and, you know, the little pop-up will come and run the script. If I duplicate this and have we're going to have a URL open. Well, we'll call it a URL button. That makes more sense. So if we have a URL button that says open URL, if I go back to my interface, so right here, I'm going to add those buttons I just added. We got the script button. I'm going to drag right here. And we have the URL button that I'm going to drag right here. So, sad to say, my script button, if I go into preview mode, it's unclickable. I can open my URL button because it just opens up a URL on my other screen, but my script button right now can't be opened. This is beta. I hope this changes in the future. That would make this amazing. You could have a whole dashboard of like a control panel. There's just so many cool things you could do. Anyways, that's kind of like the buttons. But otherwise, like the drop downs work, text fields work, the other options and data types up here to work. Due date, right, brings up a cool little calendar. So, and then you can cycle through attachments if you have an image. If there was attachments here, you could cycle through those. So that is what it does. So let's just add for our content pipeline, we wanted to have a manager approve something. So in this little header, I'm going to add a checkbox. This, as a header, there's certain things you can't add in here, I noticed. Let's add the approve checkbox. Fields and headers cannot be edited, so we can't add a checkbox there. We can add text there, but not something edited, which would be awesome. So we're going to make this editable here, and then actually yeah, whatever. So for this example, we'll just have approve here. So what we'll also say is, oh, there's one other thing I wanted to mention. You can change the label here. So if I change this label to social media picture, you can see social media picture there, but it doesn't change the underlying label here. So it kind of works similar as forms. In Airtable forms, you can change you can create like temporary labels for stuff. So it kind of works the same way. So anyways, so all of these properties, you can change headlines. You could even like we said before, you could add, like I said, I'm all alone here. You could add a paragraph of text, maybe like some instructions to someone before they're actioning on some of this stuff. You can have this same component multiple times, like I have 2 approves, but we don't want that. So in this content pipeline, I want these records to fall off my hit list after they're approved. So I would go to Content Pipeline, and the Properties toolbar comes up, and I'm going to create a filter here where approve is unchecked. Yeah, that's what I want. So now, if I were to preview this, this is my workflow. If I'm approving items, see they're dropping off the list. Like, all right, I'm going to do this one. It doesn't actually disappear from here, but at least it comes off the list. So you kind of have a hit list of, you could have like daily work that you got to do and do some work and mark it as complete or something, and then it kind of falls off your list. So you can create like a nice little hit list workflow. So that is interfaces as it stands right now. There are some things that would make interfaces really awesome. So you can add things like charts and stuff like that. So I could add like a chart, and I could say this is going to be a pie chart, and this pie chart is going to be content pipeline, and this is going to be, I don't know, we'll make it a pie chart. You can have the categories if you want it to be status or whatever the category is, values, labels, legends. You can kind of like build charts if you want like some sort of dashboard view. You can kind of just build a bunch of components like that, call it a dashboard. You don't even have to have the sidebar, obviously, for the dashboard type views. You can also add in these numbers, which are pretty slick. I really wish that I could put any arbitrary data in like a cool little box like this though, because it only allows you to do numbers that are attached to like a record or something. So it's like a record count or like a field in your column that is like countable, but it doesn't just allow you to, if you have a number in a table and the number is like orders for the week or something, and it's not like a roll-up of something, you can't just add the field of whatever that value is. Not this way. So you could add it as text, but you don't get the cool like little backgroundy headlines, with the appearance or whatever. So I thought that was kind of cool, and you can't do that. There are some advanced things you can do with filtering, where you can create a filter and you can select multiple sources for this filter, and let's say you had two grids on your interface. You could filter both grids at the same time by adding filters. You can connect like multiple things, which is pretty interesting. And you could say filter by conditions, and then as you're typing stuff in here, this data will change. So this data here changed, and this abstract data changed based on there being S's in the name. So you could literally create a filter to change like all your data at once, which is pretty cool. One thing I thought would be really awesome is a filter that's dynamic based on data from multiple grids. So it would be really cool if I could add a variable for a filter value here from something I clicked. So maybe I have a filter tied to like one table. Maybe this is like a grid view or something, and all elements, grid view. Maybe it's a grid of content. Well, that's what a grid of results maybe. And maybe I want to filter something in here. Maybe I want to even filter it from here, right? Like maybe I want this grid to filter based on something I'm selecting here. That would be sweet, but I'd have to have the ability to add like a dynamic variable from some other component on the page. So that would be cool. As it stands right now, you can't add anything else to these interfaces. So you can't add widgets. You can't add like you can't have like a little mini Kanban experience in here. You can't have calendar views, view components, or anything like that. That would be super awesome. But I wouldn't hold your breath. Airtable did an amazing job on this. I'm sure they will add to the functionality of this. The pricing for this has not been set yet, so this is something that as you build your dashboards, it'll be free for now. When I publish this, by the way, I can share it with people, and basically to get access to it, when you go to your base now, you have like a little interfaces section, and here's an interface. So I think it's an amazing feature. Oh, I forgot to mention that once I create kind of like my interface component, I can create a bunch of different views for that. So not just one view, I can create a bunch of different really cool views, and they can all kind of exist underneath that. So it's almost like you could create like a content management interface group, or I guess interface, and these are just views, and you can just invite someone to the content management, and then they can, get access to these cool views. So and then you can obviously share it with people. I don't want to send an email, but anyways, you can share it with people, and then it'll tell you the connected base, but they get access to the interface. So anyways, that is interfaces. This is pretty brief, and it's only been out for a day, so I haven't had a ton of time to play with it. I do have a couple really important use cases that I could see immediate value for this. So I'm really interested to see what you guys think of the feature. If you have any questions or what you plan on building, leave it in the comments below. But otherwise, that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed it.